right, good evening, everybody. We're just going to make sure that I've got everything set up here. There's a little bit of backdraft. Hey, good evening. This is Tara with Tarabeth Stamps. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator here in mid-Missouri. Oop, you see my fork. That's from this afternoon. I am an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator here in mid-Missouri, and tonight I am going to do a card using a couple of different products. These are all from the annual catalog. We've got the gorgeously made dies that we're using, as well as the masterfully made DSP. I'm going to use two-tone Flora, as well as something fancy stamp set. So a lot of different products, but all of them go together just perfectly in my opinion. Hey Lisa, thanks for joining. So this is today's card, super easy fun fold. I like to do these easy fun folds. Kind of gives a little bit of extra. Hey Rosie, thanks for joining. Kind of gives a little extra for our loved ones when we send those fun folds, and you know, sometimes it uses less DSP, and I love that. So I'm going to set this out of the way and we're going to get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of stamping, I think. Hey, Johnny, thanks for joining. We're going to do a little bit of stamping. So what I have here is I have the two-tone Flora stamp set. So this is a beautiful two-step stamp set. Creates several different beautiful flowers. And then, oh, I need to grab the dies out too. I've got the coordinating dies that go with this. So this makes gorgeous little flowers. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to take a small piece of basic white. And I have all of these set up. And I'm going to show you how I like to do the two-step stamping. So on this one, this small one that's got a batch of 3, I'm going to ink it up really well with some bubble bath. And I'm going to give that a nice little stamp. And then I'm going to get my ink out of the way. Hey, Susan. Hey, Angie. Thanks for joining, everybody. We've got a full house tonight. I didn't know if we would have that with everybody traveling. All right. So now I'm going to take some Berry Burst. And so, ooh, I got this inked up way too much, but that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line these up, and I'm probably going to get right in the way. And you can see through. And that went crooked, so I was afraid of that. So let's do this one again. So we'll do the outline first. I should have practiced these before I did this tonight. All right, so line it up. So sometimes I find it easier to do the outlines first, so you can see that was right on. Because it's a little easier to see those through, but I inked that one up way too much, so that was part of the problem. All right, so that's one of the flowers. Now we're going to do this one, and I'm going to do this with some Night of Navy and some Misty Moonlight. And I grabbed my Misty Moonlight ink, and then I put it back thinking I didn't need it. So I'm going to grab that real quick. Now, I'm going to tell you, my Misty Moonlight is really juicy, so I'm probably going to stamp off a little bit. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to line up and see exactly where my holes are. So it looks like, uh-oh, some puppies are joining me. All right, so that's how I want that to be. So I'm going to stamp this, ink this up well, and then, oops. Is that the Night of Navy? Yeah, or Misty Moonlight. There it is. I'm going to give that a little stamp. Then I'm going to line up those dots. And I'm going to do that again. So that's the easiest way when you're working with this particular stamp set. Oh. I lost part of my stickers on the bottom of my ink pad. So I like to do the outlines first. I seem to get a better picture or a better image that way. Hey, Karen, thanks for joining. So next, we're going to do some Berry Burst, and I'm going to do the Berry Burst in the 2 steps. I'm going to do the outline with the full, and then I'm going to do a second generation on the other one. Man, I'm inking up everything tonight. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is you can see that squiggle line. There's a squiggle line on the solid, and that's how I'm going to line that up. So I'm going to ink it up good, and then I'm going to give it one stamp off. And then hold my fingers just right and hope that it worked, and it did. Woohoo! All right, now I'm going to bring in a little bit of Acer Afternoon. Lily, I need you to run on. Baby girl wants to play ball. All right, so there's that. And now I have another piece of basic white that we are going to stamp the sentiment on. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of line this DSP up on the edge, because as you can see in the original that I did, I've got DSP on the corner, so I don't want to center this because then it's going to be visible. So I'm going to set that kind of just loosely, and then I'm going to center it the best I can this direction. All right, that looks like it might work. And it's not too crooked, so that works. I'm going to take it. All right, so we're going to do a little die cutting. I'm going to bring out my mini machine, because this is what I love to use for these little flowers and guys. And so this is the mini boho machine, and I believe it's still available in the catalog, but I didn't double check that today. You can always get the white one if you don't have it. So I'm pulling out my dies and just lining them up. And so I stamped these far enough apart that I think I can do this in 2 shots. So this one, you just kind of have to whirl it around until you find that perfect spot. And maybe that's not the right one. Nope, that's this one. I feel like it is. It has to be this one. Here we go. Sometimes you just have to keep whirling and whirling and whirling and twirling until they set. Okay, with my die machine, I'm going to snap this down and hold it in place. That way I don't need any like repositionable tape. And I'm trying to crank this easy because I don't want this to shake my camera too much. So I'm doing it a little slower than I normally would. All right, so there's that. We'll set these flowers over here. Get rid of that scrap paper. Nobody wants to see that. Okay, so I'm lining this up, and then I'm going to pull out my gorgeously made dies. This is a beautiful die set. It is standalone. You get so much, and I love this torn looking sentiment. I love that. Is, you know, sometimes you just have a favorite die that you use all the time, and that seems to be one of my very favorites. I use it for sentiments at least a couple of times a week. I'm going to hold this down and in place. And so I was able to die cut all of that in just 2 shots. That's not perfect, but we're going to make it work. I'm going to get rid of that trash, throw the sentiment over there, and then I'll set the machine out of the way. So now we're ready to put the card together. Karen, aren't they the perfect dies? They are, oh, they are wonderful. So as I said, the gorgeously made dies, perfect because you get this little bookmark, notebook paper die. You get your beautiful foliage. You get this great torn looking edge that is super cool, as well as the torn looking sentiment die. Perfect, perfect setup. All right, now we're going to put this together. I'm just going to take a little bit of seal and run it along some of this Masterfully gorgeous DSP. And we're going to put, yeah, we're going to put the pink at the bottom. So that's Berry Burst cardstock. This cardstock, or this DSP, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't digging it when I first saw it. It was just okay. It has quickly become a favorite of mine. It is fun to use. It's great for backgrounds. I'm just trimming that up a little bit just to make sure it looks nice. All right, so this is the inside. We've got that one ready. All right, now we're going to make the panel for our front. And so this is something that's new for Stampin' Up that I don't know of. This is the white centered specialty cardstock. So I've already cut it with that notebook edge. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tear it just ever so slightly to give it that torn wedge look. And because Stampin' Up cardstock is the same fibers all the way throughout, there is not a white core. So that's why this paper is just a little cooler. And so what I'm doing is I'm just tearing ever so gently to create that torn, rough look. And that way, not every one of them is going to look the same. So I measured this to the exact same size the panel was, because I wanted to tear off just this edge just a little bit. So I'm just tearing it ever so slightly, and that's wearing that edge, which I think is a perfect look for this cardstock to go with this DSP. All right, so this is a piece of 3 1/4 by 3 1/4. I've scored it at, or 3 3/4 by 3 3/4, and I scored it on the side at 3 1/4. So this is going to create that flap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adhere that right there. And actually, I'm going to shave just a little bit more off this edge. So this is super cool paper. It looks really great when you run it through the die machine with an embossing folder. And then you can sand just a little bit. Just understand it is quite a bit thinner than our regular cardstock. And it does have a texture that we're not used to seeing. All right. There we go. Okay, now what I've done is I've already die cut a piece of Pretty Peacock as well as a piece of Lost Lagoon with those gorgeously made dies. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off just this bottom rung. Now, yesterday when I was doing this, I thought I would just make that one little cut and it would go, but it's connected. So I'm just going to do a little bit of trimming here, and you just kind of roll it around. And now I'm going to go ahead, there we go. Sometimes you have to play around with it a little bit. So there's that. And so this way it will fit on our card front just a little bit better. And sometimes you just have to take the scissors and put them away and say that is enough. Okay. I'm going to sit this there, and I'm going to bring out my mini dimensionals. So this is really kind of odd because some people cut their Stampin' Dimensionals in half. You're not getting very much if you cut your minis in half, but you almost have to. And it takes about 1 dimensional or 2 halves to get this down. Now, you could go ahead and just use the full size mini dimensional or a half dimensional because the flowers pretty much cover it up. But me being me, I want it covered up. So I'm going to put that there. And then I'm going to decide kind of how I want this guy in here. So I think I like him there, but I am going to cut off just a scotch. And that's a official term, scotch. Okay. All right, we're going to put another we'll put a whole dimensional there. And we're going to put that just right there. Okay, so we're building our flowers up from the bottom down. Okay, so then you kind of have to decide how you want your flowers laid out with your sentiment. So I really love these little guys. I think they're beautiful. So I kind of like it like that. And then I can put that sentiment right there. Now I want to be careful when I'm placing and getting all this figured out that I'm not going to go past that score line. And you don't want to be super close to it because you're going to be, all right, hopefully we'll be back. Sorry about that, guys. Daddy must not know I'm doing lives tonight. All right, so I'm going to add this bottom one here with just liquid adhesive. So now I'm going to add a dimensional here on the side of the flower and then add some liquid adhesive here. Okay. There we go. So it's layered and popped there. Now we just need to add, looks like a small dimensional right here, and then we'll add liquid adhesive to the top so that it all sticks together. Okay, now I'm going to cover up my favorite flower. I don't want to do that, but I'm going to have to. There we go. So let's add a dimensional on the end here, and then more liquid adhesive. And there is basically our card front. So now all we have to do is put our card together. So what I have is I have a 5.5 by 7 1/4 sheet of cardstock. Is that right? 7 1/4? 7.5. 7.5. And it's scored at 4 1/4. Yeah. So this is going to be folded over. We're going to burnish it. And then be careful, because I have done this more than once. As I'm putting this card together, I get so quick about how I'm doing things. We're going to go ahead and put this one in. So I'm going to fold this over and burnish it. And I'm going to take some tear and tape. You can use liquid adhesive. That'll give you a little bit of wiggle room, but I like tear tape because it seems to be a little stronger with these cards that have flaps. So as you can tell, I use all sorts of different adhesives, but I think they all have their purpose. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line this up with that edge folded, and I'm going to line it up to the edge, and then I'm going to seal it down once I feel like it's where it needs to be placed. So there's our flap. We'll go ahead and put the inside in with a little seal. So let's see here. Make sure you've got your nice even edges. Just run your fingers along that adhesive. Karen, thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed it. All right. I think this paper is what does it. It's absolutely stunning. All right. Now let's make sure we're going to put the pink at the bottom, or the berry burst at the bottom, because you want to make sure, because these did come from the same piece of cards or DSP. I want to make sure they're lined up. All right, there's the birthday card right there. Fun, fun, fun fold. Super easy to do. Let's make our matching envelope. There's a little bit going on this week. This is the last week. You can grab up my paper share or product share. If you're wanting that sample of product from the September to December catalog. That's coming out soon. I'll be ordering it not this next week, but the next week. And then it will be expedited to me. I've got the weekend after completely marked off and ready to cut up and get those out in the mail. I usually have those in the mail on Monday after the catalog goes live. So it's a pretty quick turnaround for you. They are sent priority, so they should get there pretty quickly. So if you've got any questions about that, give me a shout out. There we go. All these dimensions and directions will be available on my blog. Thanks so much for spending your Sunday night with me. I'll be back next Sunday for another card. and we'll see what I come up with. Have a great week. Thanks.